Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about one of the biggest figures in social justice activism today, former football player turned professional whiner Colin Kaepernick. We all know Colin best for his ridiculous kneeling stunts which he pulled during national anthems toward the end of his NFL sports career. Kaepernick wasn't getting much play time in his later years because he's just not that good of a quarterback, so he decided to stage these publicity stunts as a way to get himself some more attention again. In this way, he's kind of similar to last year's controversial figure, Jussie Smollett, if you think about it a little bit, you know. Although Colin Kaepernick didn't fake any hate crimes exactly, he has been known to play the victim extensively, and also he did these stunts later in his career to gain attention, much like how Jussie did in his acting career. Both are also mixed race, by the way, who had fathers that were largely absent from their lives, for the record. Not saying that to rub it in their faces or anything, but it's worth noting, and it's certainly a trend these kinds of wannabe activists tend to have. They play the black card as hard as possible, even though they're only half. And without fathers in their lives to raise them properly as kids, well, now they've turned into weak men who cry and complain and play the victim like sad little children. But we're not here to play armchair psychologist to Jussie or Colin today. Just giving you guys some background and context before we get into this juicy news story. Basically, Colin Kaepernick has come to the attention of the media once again this week. This time, he's starting a charity to help raise funds and relieve people during this desperate time caused by the ongoing health crisis. But here's the thing, there is one catch. Colin isn't just being the open and loving and charitable guy like how he wants you to think. No, actually, his donation and help are coming with some very important and telling stipulations. For starters, you have to be a certain race in order to receive it. Or actually, and to be more specific, you have to not be a certain race that Colin doesn't seem to like. He also happens to be half that race himself, and even Colin was raised by a family of that race which he hates too. But regardless, Kaepernick is abandoning his own family and opting to help and support the community who abandoned him as a child, ironically enough. Now, I'm sure you can already guess who and what races I'm talking about, but we'll also get to the specifics and the meat of the story fully very soon. But first, let's take a quick half minute to check out our loyal sponsors. In light of this recent health scare and people looking everywhere to get protective masks for their faces, some might want to consider getting themselves a hardcore gas mask to protect against attacks and other dangers. So that's why I suggest you check out getagasmask.com, because they have high quality products at affordable prices, and if you sign up today, you can get in while their limited supplies are still lasting. Visit getagasmask.com today. That's getagasmask.com. Help yourselves stay safe and also help support this channel too at the same time. Great, now let's get back to the Colin Kaepernick story. Here's an article with more details about his controversial donation strategy. It's called Colin Kaepernick is donating $100,000 to relief efforts to aid communities of color. Well, I guess we should have seen this coming. Not only is Colin Kaepernick a radical social justice warrior with terrible and racist far-left rhetoric, but also he's self-hating and he's insecure, and he often does whatever he can to try and appear down with the minorities. Or more importantly, he wants to virtue signal and show that he hates whites. That's why ever since Colin's football career started to go downhill, he started sporting this ridiculous and over-the-top 60s style afro hair. Really makes him look more black, and also, it's a throwback to the past when the civil rights movement was actually relevant and more necessary. And in addition to LARPing as a civil rights era activist, Colin also participates in open and obvious anti-white racism by promising to donate $100,000, but only if the money goes to people who aren't white. I mean, I think I would have been less upset if he just picked one group, like saying this donation is going to African Americans specifically, or Mexicans or Jewish people, for example. But instead, Colin uses the vaguer term communities of color, which is just basically a nicer way of saying no white people. And I always found this us versus them mentality rather odd here too, since, I mean, why do they get to lump black and brown people together like that? They're just as different from each other as they are from whites and Asians. So I don't know why SJWs like this try and pick up more people of color by combining blacks and browns, like they're the same. This seems especially weird with Colin Kaepernick, who is half black and half white and has nothing to do with brown people whatsoever. But regardless, they get covered in this situation, mostly because he's just being low-key anti-white. Regardless, let's read on here anyway and see where this story goes. Colin Kaepernick announced Thursday he was contributing $100,000 to a relief fund, which will go toward aiding black and brown communities affected by the pandemic. The fund, which launched as part of the activist Know Your Rights campaign, will focus on food, shelter relief, education, personal personal protective equipment in incarcerated populations to help stop the spread of the virus and provide further resources. Black and brown communities are being disproportionately devastated because of hundreds of years of structural racism. Kaepernick says in a video posted to his Twitter, "That's why we established the Know Your Rights Camp Relief Fund to help address these issues." Yikes. Couple of things I noticed here right away. First of all, I love how the incarcerated populations get a mention and some love here. Guess we shouldn't be too surprised though, since our last video on this channel featured two other prominent celebrities trying to help criminals too. They were trying to get them freed from prison. And now Colin Kaepernick is donating to prisoners directly. So that makes me wonder, if the prisoners are white, are they going to get donations too? Because I get the feeling they are going to have to be black or brown as well, like how the rest of his donations stipulate. And by the way, donating something with lots of stipulations like this, that's highly suspect to me. Makes it look like you're having a lot of strings attached to your money, which isn't really as charitable as you would think. Next, Kaepernick goes on to claim that black and brown communities are more affected by this crisis because of hundreds of years of supposed racism. Wow, where do I even start with that idea? First of all, viruses can't be racist. They affect people of any kind, and if they come into contact with you, you'll get them, regardless of race. Next, I want to talk about how I've never been a big fan of the whole idea that when a crisis hits the world like this, minorities are the most affected. Sounds like a desperate, attention-seeking, misleading bit of information to me, but if you do believe studies like this one I found at Vox.com, well, there are some statistics that say black and brown people are catching the illness and dying more than whites or Asians. But that's all this chart really shows us, a difference between the races. But SJWs, of course, see differences and assume there's racism. But that's not really how things work. If you want to prove something's racist, you have to give us actual racist examples and proof. Just showing us a difference isn't that, because the difference can be caused by a variety of reasons, the last of which I would say is racism, because that's ridiculous. Really, most reasonable people know that these minorities are catching it more because they're likely living in more urban areas. And when populations are more crowded and close together and in dirty and congested areas, like how it is in big cities where these groups tend to gather, well, that's going to make the disease spread faster and wider and to more people. In addition, one could speculate that certain races and their objections to authority and their unlikeliness to listen to police or the government, well, that cultural factor would certainly make a disease spread worse in their areas too. Not having fathers around means kids don't respect authority as much too. They bucket and instead do the opposite and don't listen purposely. Like what's happened when states ask people to stay quarantined, but some groups in the ghettos will still go out, party, and have large birthday gatherings with children no less. Another factor could possibly be hygiene or immunities or any of another large variety of more reasonable and accurate factors, none of which have anything to do with racism. Next, let's look at the attached video and see Colin Kaepernick talk more about this ridiculous premise and racist donation bit himself, in a video that's really just designed to make him look more woke. Take a look at this one.
Black and brown communities are being disproportionately devastated because of hundreds of years of structural racism.
There's been a misinformation that black people can't get the virus.
Poorer areas, which are mostly black and brown, have the heaviest number of patients that have been affected.
Again, just because a group is more affected doesn't mean that's because of racism. Liberals need to get this idea out of their heads and let it die. Pointing out differences doesn't mean you found racism. Having proof that you saw something racist happen does though. Like if someone says a racial slur or fires someone for being a certain race, or they attack a certain race, or so on and so forth. You gotta have proof of the racism. You can't just assume it because numbers are different. And if we did assume things were racist here because of the numbers, then if we look back at this chart, wouldn't the Asians be the most racist then? Because according to studies like this one from earlier, they are the least affected. So according to SJW logic, Asians are being racist to the rest of us. Never mind the fact that this plague actually came from Asia too, but regardless, somehow the left found a way to blame white Americans. Not sure many are going to accept the whole hundreds of years of racism caused this though, because of course that's not true at all. Sure, there are racists out there and there were far more in the past, but the problem has been largely overblown for decades now. If certain communities haven't fixed their problems over the years and brought themselves up by now, well, I hate to say it, but eventually it's their own darn fault. Jewish Americans, for example, bounced back from tragedies like the ones in World War II in less than 50 years. So surely African Americans and other minorities have had enough time to come around, especially for blacks, since slavery ended in this country over 150 years ago.
Bus drivers are on the front lines of this pandemic every day.
We out here doing our job.
After he made that video, Hargrove began to feel sick himself. He died Wednesday night.
If you do not have to be out, Do not.
Health inequities are because we've had policies that devalue groups of people.
Look at the hospital, they're putting bodies in the back of a freezer truck, y'all.
These are terrible images, sure, and heartbreaking situations, of course, which are caused by this health scare going on right now, but none of this has anything to do with racism, nor does any of this prove that minorities are being adversely affected by this because of their race. All we really got is a bus driver who caught it, and a hospital that's getting rid of dead bodies, and then some bogus claim that policies in America are adversely affecting minorities. Citation needed, though, because unless you're going to list one or any of those policies, I think it's safe to assume you're just making them up. There's no laws that are biased against blacks or browns specifically. They just get arrested more because they break more laws more often, and they get caught. In addition, the system actually favors them in many ways if you look into it, like how they get special treatment and they get hired over whites and Asians because affirmative action laws say they have to, which makes public institutions, schools, and companies hire a certain number of minorities just cause, or else. And this, of course, has other adverse effects on these companies hiring because it results in lower quality and less trained workers, since the people hiring can no longer look for the best hires. They have to arbitrarily hire a certain number of minorities regardless of their training or compatibility.
These communities are going to be devastated.
That's why we've established the Know Your Rights Camp Relief Fund to help address these issues. Go to knowyourrightscamp.com to help.
Well, Colin, you're just as terrible, biased, and anti-white and racist as ever. Instead of actually trying to help and giving away money to whoever needs it, you made this about race for no reason. And even, you low-key blame this all on whites, attacking another race based on their skin color, the same thing you claim your opponents are doing, by the way. And just imagine if this was done the other way around. If, say, a half-white athlete started a charity fundraiser for thousands of dollars, but said it could only be given out to white people and Asians, you know, people without color, well, that would obviously be called racist and get that person in trouble. You would be stopped, fired from your job, and the SJWs would be protesting at your family's homes. But for some reason, call it double standards. Well, as we've said time and time again here lately, according to the left, it's okay when they do it, and that includes doing racism. What do you guys think? Is this a blatant display of Colin Kaepernick's non-white bias? Should charity be considered good if you have these kinds of caveats and strings attached? And do you think the virus is racist, like what's implied here? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button to help support this channel, and we'll see y'all next time.